Somewhere in Coronado, California, a man is walking toward a brass bell. The moment he rings it 3 times, it's over. And the instructors put donuts next to that bell on purpose, so the men who quit can sit and eat, while the ones who stay keep suffering. 185 men start, 34 finish. But surviving Bud/S isn't even the hard part. What comes after, the things you carry home that nobody around you will ever see or understand, that's what this is really about. Your life at every Navy SEAL rank. Level 1 to 10. Level 1. The candidate. You show up to basic underwater demolition/SEAL training with a shaved head and 18 months of preparation behind you. You've been running in boots, swimming in cold water, doing thousands of push-ups in your garage at midnight. You've memorized the SEAL Creed. You've watched every documentary. You think you're ready. You aren't. Nobody who walks through that gate is. The instructors aren't measuring fitness. They're measuring the distance between your body saying stop and your mind saying no. That gap, the space between those 2 words, is the only thing they care about. 185 men stand beside you on that first morning. By the final day of training, 34 will have made it. The rest will have quit, been injured, or been cut. Most will quit, more than you'd expect in the first week. The bell sits on the beach like a permanent reminder. You see it every morning, every evening, every time your legs give out on the soft sand runs. On day 4, the strongest man in your class walks toward it. He maxed every fitness test at intake. Fastest swimmer in the group by 40 seconds. He rings it without hesitating and walks away without looking back. It doesn't make sense until later, when you finally understand that fitness was never the point. It was never about who was strongest. It was always about who could keep going when every reasonable part of their brain was screaming at them to stop. Hell Week begins Sunday at midnight, 5.5 days, 4 hours of sleep, not per night, total. You don't stop moving. Explosions wake you before you've closed your eyes. Fire hoses hit you in pitch darkness. Every order contradicts the last one. You run over 200 miles. You carry boats on your head until the skin wears off your scalp. You sit in 58-degree Pacific water in January until you shake so violently the man beside you grabs your arm because he thinks you're seizing. By Wednesday, you hallucinate. A man in your boat crew holds a full conversation with someone who isn't there. Nobody laughs. Everyone understands. 75% of your class quits during Hell Week. You don't. Not because you're stronger than the men who did. Some of them were stronger, faster, better trained. They quit because their minds told them to, and they listened. You didn't listen. That's the only difference. That will always be the only difference. But surviving Hell Week doesn't make you a SEAL. It just means you've earned the right to keep going. And what's waiting on the other side will test something Hell Week never came close to touching. Level 2. The new guy. You graduate BUD/S. You complete SEAL qualification training. 26 more weeks of combat diving, land warfare, and demolitions. You earn the Trident, a gold eagle clutching a trident, an anchor, and a flintlock pistol. They press it into your chest and you think, this is the beginning. It is. Just not the beginning you imagined. Not even close. You're an E4. Petty Officer 3rd Class. The lowest ranking operational SEAL in the teams. You report to your first platoon and you are, without question, nothing. The men around you have deployments behind their eyes. A specific kind of silence that comes from having done things they'll never fully explain and wouldn't expect you to understand yet. Your job is simple. Carry the heaviest equipment on every movement. Clean weapons that aren't yours. Speak only when spoken to. Shut up and learn. You do all of it without complaint, because complaining would be the fastest way to confirm every doubt they already have about you. The platoon chief is an E7 with 12 years in. He can read a compound from 300 meters. the lights off at the wrong hour, the stillness that feels deliberate, the way a dog is barking, and tell you whether it's occupied and whether it's ready for you. You think he's exaggerating until one night a dog barks wrong and the building erupts in automatic fire before your team is even through the gate. Your first deployment is 6 months of direct action. Door kicks at 2 a.m. in places you'll never name publicly. You pull rooftop security while your teammates clear rooms below. You hear gunfire, shouting, then silence. Then the radio crackles and tells you whether everyone is still breathing. Your first firefight lasts 11 minutes. It feels like 11 hours. A round passes close enough that you hear the snap. Not a crack, a sonic boom from a bullet that would have killed you if you'd been 6 inches to the left. Afterward, your hands shake for 20 minutes. The chief sees it, says nothing. His hands shook once too. Around the third deployment, yours will stop. That's also when you stop calling home every night. You don't notice it happening. You just realize one day that it already did. And by level 3, the person you were before any of this will feel like someone else entirely. Level 3, the operator, E5, Petty Officer 2nd Class. 2 deployments behind you, and you're starting to understand the rhythm. 18 months of workup for every 6-month deployment. Range time. Thousands of rounds per week until reloading isn't a conscious decision anymore. It's just something your hands do while your eyes stay on the threat. You specialize. Every SEAL becomes something specific. Medic, sniper, communications, intel. You become the breacher, the man who opens doors, sometimes with explosives, sometimes with a ram, sometimes with a shotgun loaded with breaching rounds that turn a lock into dust. You learn exactly how much C4 it takes to blow a hinge without killing everyone standing on the other side. The answer depends on the door, the frame, the material, the standoff distance. Get it wrong, and people die. You know this because someone got it wrong once, 3 months before you joined the teams. You never met him. You've read his after-action report twice. You'll read it again before your next deployment. On your third deployment, your team extracts a high-value target. Intelligence says he's alone. He isn't. There's a woman and 2 children in the back room. The target grabs a child and reaches for a weapon at the same time. Your teammate takes the shot because there is no other option and no time to find one. The round passes inches from the child's face. The child is physically unharmed. You think about that word, physically, for months afterward. You're still thinking about it now. Each deployment after that blurs into the last. Different country, different language, same mission. Find the target, fix his location, finish him. The men beside you rotate, injured, promoted, or quietly out. The work stays the same. You're better at violence and worse at everything else. You can clear a room in 3 seconds, and you can't sit through dinner without cataloging every exit. Your girlfriend asks if you're okay. You say yes, because that's the trained answer, and because the honest one would require explanations you're not cleared to give, and emotions you're not entirely sure you still know how to reach. Level 4 is when the job stops being something you do, and starts being something you are, whether you want it to or not. Level 4, the Senior Operator, E6, Petty Officer 1st Class. Leading Petty Officer of your platoon, 6 years in. You're responsible for the junior guys now, the new guys who remind you of yourself in ways that make you genuinely uncomfortable. Eager, undertrained, absolutely certain they're invincible, and that the stories they've heard about what can go wrong will never apply to them. You were exactly the same. You know better now. You've been to enough funerals to know better. An operator in your 2nd platoon took a corner too fast on a night raid, caught a burst of automatic fire in the chest. His plate stopped most of it. 1 round found the gap under his arm where the armor ends. He bled out in 4 minutes while the medic worked and the rest of the team finished clearing the building, because the mission doesn't stop for casualties. Not until every room is secure. Not until the structure is clear. He was 24 years old, He'd been in the teams for 14 months. You run daily operations now, training schedules, equipment checks, readiness reports. The paperwork nobody ever pictures when they imagine what it means to be a SEAL. For every hour of combat, there are 1,000 hours of preparation. Gear lists, rehearsals, intelligence briefings, communications checks, medical inventories. You've become an administrator who kicks down doors on occasion. The transition is disorienting in a way you weren't prepared for. You joined to be a warrior. You're becoming a manager. And some days those feel like opposite things. But you understand now why it matters. The platoons that skip steps don't just fail missions, they lose men. Your body is showing the mileage, knees creaking from years of parachute landings, back aching from carrying 80 pounds through mountains and rubble and desert. Hearing diminished on one side from a breaching charge that detonated too close on your last deployment. The corpsman will document it all someday. Right now, there's another deployment on the calendar. You tape your ankles. Swallow ibuprofen. Tell the corpsman you're fine. Everyone tells the corpsman they're fine. He knows you're all lying. He's always known. But level 5 is where the weight shifts completely. Because now it's not just your life in your hands. It's 16 of them. 16. Level 5. The Chief. E7. Chief Petty Officer. Ask anyone in the teams what the most important rank is. Not the most decorated. Not the highest paid. The most important. They'll tell you this one every time. Officers plan operations. Chiefs make them work. That's not a saying. That's the architecture of how this entire organization functions. You're the platoon chief now. 16 men under your direct leadership. The platoon commander is an 03, a lieutenant, 4 years younger than you. A decade less experienced in every way that actually matters. In a dark building at 2 a.m. He graduated Annapolis. Smart, driven, disciplined, and genuinely motivated. He's also never been shot at. You have been dozens of times across 7 deployments. Your job is to take his plan and make it executable without making him feel like you're the one actually running his platoon. Even though you are. That's the balance nobody teaches you. You lead from behind the rank and make it look effortless. When his scheme of maneuver will trap the rear element in a crossfire, you pull him aside quietly. You explain it without an audience. He adjusts. He listens. Because junior officers who don't listen to their chiefs show up in casualty reports, and the good ones know it. Your 7th deployment, a nighttime raid on a compound where a bomb maker operates. His devices have killed 14 Americans in the past 6 months. You briefed your team using photos of those men as motivation. The intelligence is solid. The plan is sound. You've run the rehearsals 4 times. Everything goes wrong anyway. The entry point is barricaded from the inside. The breach fails on the first attempt. The target opens fire through the walls before you're even through the door. One of your operators takes a round in the leg. Femoral artery nicked, blood pooling faster than you've ever seen it move. You drag him behind cover. Apply a tourniquet so tight, he screams loud enough to give away your position. Call the QRF. Continue directing the assault. Rounds punch through plaster 6 inches from your head, and you don't flinch because there's no time to flinch. The target is killed. Your operator survives. 8 months of rehabilitation, but alive. The mission is classified a success. You write the after-action report on the helicopter home, with his blood still drying on your gloves. Nobody outside the clearance chain will ever read a single word of it. Level 6 isn't a rank, but it's the one that breaks more operators than any of them. Level 6, the cost. This isn't a rank. It's what happens between them. The part the recruitment videos never show and the documentaries skip past in 30 seconds. Your marriage ended during your 5th deployment. She called it irreconcilable differences. The difference was that you left for 6 months at a time and came back as someone she didn't fully recognize anymore. Each deployment took something civilian out of you, and replaced it with something harder, quieter, and further away from the man she married. She'd find you at 3 a.m. standing in the backyard, completely still, scanning the tree line for threats that don't exist in suburban Virginia Beach. She stopped trying to explain it to the neighbors after the second time. Your kids are 8 and 11. Your son stopped asking when you'd be home. He checks the calendar on the refrigerator and counts down the days himself without saying a word about it. Your daughter drew a family portrait in school. You're not in it, not because she forgot you, because her teacher asked her to draw the people who live in her house. And you don't. You live in team rooms and safe houses and the back of military aircraft. You keep the drawing in your locker. You look at it before every deployment. It hurts in a way that no bullet ever has. Specific and quiet, and without any adrenaline to soften it. Divorce rates in the SEAL community run near 90% by some estimates. The men who stay married are either lucky or married to someone extraordinary, or both. The rest accumulate child support and phone calls from the wrong time zone that always end with someone crying and neither person saying what they actually mean. The bullets you can train for, the loneliness you never could. And at level 7, the weight of what you're carrying privately is about to get heavier. Right as the scope of what you're responsible for expands beyond anything you've known before. Level 7, the Senior Chief. E8, fewer than 2,500 senior chiefs in the entire Navy. In the SEAL community, a fraction of that number. A board of Master Chiefs reviewed everything in your file. Every deployment, every evaluation report, every commendation, every failure, every decision you made when it mattered, and a few you'd take back if you could. You made the cut. Most don't. The ones who don't go back to their teams and pretend it doesn't sting. It does. You're the operations senior chief for an entire SEAL team now. 4 platoons, 64 operators, plus support staff spread across multiple locations. You coordinate training cycles, deployment schedules, and equipment readiness across the whole command. You're the bridge between what the commanding officer intends and what the platoon chiefs on the ground actually execute. When the CO wants the real answer, not the version that's been smoothed out and sanitized for a briefing slide, he comes directly to you. You deploy less now. When you do, you stand in tactical operations centers, watching drone feeds of raids you would have led yourself 5 years ago. You feel something unexpected watching those screens. Envy. You miss the simplicity of it. The door, the breach, the next room. Now everything is risk assessments written for decision makers in Washington who have never once heard a round, fired in anger, and never will. You've started attending funerals that have nothing to do with combat. Suicides, 4 in 2 years from your extended community. One was a man you mentored from his very first platoon. You taught him sniper wind calls on a cold range in Virginia. You stood beside him at his wedding. He called 3 weeks before he died and laughed about something his kid did at school. He sounded completely fine. You believed him because believing was easier than asking the harder question. The one you already knew the answer to, but weren't ready to hear. Out loud, you show up to the memorial. His mother looks at you across the room. You don't have answers. You just show up because that's what chiefs have always done. At level 8, the decisions you make are no longer about rooms. They're about wars and the men who don't come home from them. Level 8, the Master Chief. E9, the highest enlisted rank in the United States Navy. Command Master Chief for a Naval Special Warfare Group. Thousands of operators and support personnel across multiple teams. You sit in Pentagon briefings where decisions are made by people who have never worn body armor, never cleared a room, never written a condolence letter to a family they actually knew. You represent every enlisted SEAL in the command. You are their voice in rooms where their lives are treated as variables in an equation. You testify before oversight committees, using language that is carefully honest and strategically incomplete. Because that is how this level of the game is played, and pretending otherwise gets people killed or defunded. You sign condolence letters. You review after-action reports, searching for the line between acceptable risk and recklessness. You sit in living rooms with Gold Star families and look at photographs of men you sent into situations where dying was a realistic outcome. Sometimes a mother asks if her son suffered. You tell her he didn't. You don't always know if that's true. You tell her anyway because there is nothing else to give her. Your body is a catalog of everything it absorbed over 25 years. 2 knee replacements, a fused vertebra in your lower back, tinnitus so constant you've forgotten what actual silence sounds like, a shoulder rebuilt with titanium after a fast rope insertion went wrong on your 8th deployment, married twice. The first ended because of the job. The second survived because she was a nurse who understood broken people and didn't need you to be whole to love you. On the nights the dreams come back, she doesn't ask what you saw. She makes coffee and sits beside you until your breathing slows. She is the reason you haven't become one of the statistics you keep attending funerals for. You know this. You tell her sometimes, not nearly often enough. At level 9, it all ends with a ceremony in a team room, 50 people, and a shadow box that doesn't come close to explaining what any of it actually cost. Level 9, the Trident. You retire. 28 years. The ceremony is in a team room at the Naval Special Warfare Compound in Virginia Beach. 50 people, not senators, not generals, not public affairs officers who want a photo for the base newsletter. The operators, the chiefs, the men who went through the same doors you did, made the same calls you made, and came out the other side carrying the same weight you carry. The only audience that has ever mattered. Your commanding officer reads a citation that is technically accurate and emotionally insufficient. 11 deployments, 9 combat tours, a silver star for carrying a wounded teammate 400 meters under fire while returning fire with your secondary weapon and keeping him alive long enough to reach the extraction point. The citation doesn't mention you were wounded too. You didn't notice until the adrenaline faded on the helicopter and the medic pointed to the blood running steadily down your arm. You told him you were fine. He didn't believe you either. A shadow box is assembled, your Trident, your rank insignia, your patches and challenge coins, your entire career reduced to objects behind glass in a wooden frame. It's smaller than you expected. Everything always is. You moved to a house near the water because you've spent your entire adult life near the ocean and genuinely don't know how to exist without the sound of it outside your window. You take a contractor job because they want your clearance and your contacts, and they'll pay 3 times your military salary. The work is adequate. It keeps your hands busy. It's not the same. Nothing will ever be the same, and you knew that before you signed the retirement papers. Your body still wakes you at 5 a.m. because 28 years of muscle memory doesn't recognize the word retirement. You run slower now. Brace on your knee. Earbuds loud enough to cover the ringing that never stops and never will. But level 10 isn't yours anymore. It belongs entirely to the ones just now stepping onto the sand for the first time. Level 10. The cycle. Somewhere in Coronado right now, a new class is forming on the beach. 180 men standing in the pre-dawn dark, shivering in wet sand, staring at a brass bell they've promised themselves they will never ring. They've watched the films. They've read the books. They've trained for 18 months in their garages and on their local tracks and in cold lakes that felt nothing like the Pacific in January. They're dreaming about the Trident. They have absolutely no idea what it costs. They don't know about the doors kicked in at 2 a.m., the split-second decisions that will replay in their heads for 30 years without ever resolving. They don't know about the marriages that won't survive the 4th deployment. The children who draw family portraits without their fathers in them. Not out of anger, but because daddy isn't someone who lives in the house. They don't know about the funerals for men who survived every firefight, but couldn't survive the silence that came after. They don't know about the VA waiting rooms, the titanium joints, the ringing that never stops, the 3 a.m. walks around the perimeter of a quiet suburban house, checking for threats that exist only in the part of the brain that never fully came home. They don't know the Trident will become the heaviest thing they own. Heavier than the ruck, heavier than the body armor, heavier than the teammates they'll one day carry to extraction points under fire. They just know they won't quit. Right now, that's enough to start. It was never enough to finish, but it's always been enough to start. The bell waits, the ocean doesn't care, and the next class is already deciding who they are in the dark. The question was never whether you could survive BUD/S. Every man on that beach thinks he can survive BUD/S. The real question is what you'd be willing to give up after. The deployments, the marriage, the version of yourself that existed before any of this started. Because the Trident doesn't just change what you do, it changes what you are. Permanently and completely, and without asking permission. Which level hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments. And subscribe. There are more stories like this one coming.